Councilmember Curtis?
Present.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Here.
Councilmember Danuski?
Here.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Sperry?
Here.
Councilmember Herbig?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Thank you.
If I could please get you to stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'm going to break a little bit here with tradition. I feel it's necessary. I need to apologize publicly for not recognizing the deputy mayor at a function last week. It's a total oversight on my part, and I truly apologize for that oversight. It should never have happened. I cannot read this. Bear with me 1 second. I'm having trouble here. I cannot read.
It wasn't an oversight.
This. It was an oversight. What in the heck? There we go. All right. Next item on the agenda then is we need to adjourn from our special meeting. And next item then is approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. All right, the next item on the agenda, this one is fun that we get a chance to do this one. I want to take this opportunity to read a letter. Let's see. I think I can break a little bit here and do the other one first. The Washington Finance Officers Association would like to inform us that Brian Randall has earned the Professional Finance Officer Award for the state of Washington from the Washington Finance Officers Association. And this annual award requires ongoing education and professional excellence on the part of each individual and is not automatically awarded. Brian is committed to achieving educational professional excellence as acknowledged in the receipt of this award for the last 8 years. And the association would like to take this opportunity to thank you for your considered support and encouragement to recognize this accomplishment in some manner. Brian, I know you work hard, and we really, really appreciate your efforts, and we really appreciate the fact that you've gotten this award for 8 years in a row. So thank you very much. Now, the Washington Finance Officers Association would like to inform the city that Joanne Gregory has earned the Professional Finance Officer Award for the state of Washington from the Washington Finance Officers Association. And the annual award requires ongoing educational professional excellence on the part of each individual, is not automatically awarded. And Joanne is committed to achieving educational and professional excellence as acknowledged in the receipt of this award for the past 14 years. I know that we sometimes joke with you that expenses are down and revenues are up. We heard the report. Now you can go sit down. But I'm telling you, we really, really appreciate your hard work and everything that you've done for the city. And this really means a lot to us. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you in the community. And we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Will clerk please call the first person?
Vicki Grayland.
Hello. Did you want me to repeat my name and address?
Name and address, yes, please, for the record.
I'm Vicki Grayland. I live at 20308 73rd Avenue Northeast in Kenmore.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I wanted to mention that in Seattle and many places in our country, today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and I want to invite you to join me in gratitude and in honoring the Indigenous people, especially here the Duwamish, who were the protectors of this land for so long. And I wanted to talk about the Council's study about alternatives to Puget Sound energy. I want to congratulate the Council for this decision, and I also wanted to ask, when is citizen input going to be taken on that? And I also want to encourage alternative energy, renewable energy. I think this is a great opportunity to investigate what the city can do about solar. There are other cities like Kirkland that are in the Solar Cities program. They help make permitting easier. They help people understand the tax incentives for installing solar. And do you have any answers about the schedule for the study?
Yeah, well, I can certainly do that in the summary when we're finished. I'll ask the city manager to comment on that here in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Essie Mohazabafar, sorry.
Good evening. My name is Essie Mohazafar. I reside at 16108 84th Avenue Northeast. And I would like to inform you that the very codes that this body has enacted was deliberately ignored by the city staff on a project called Simon's Court. To give you a background, Simon's Court is a 7-lot subdivision adjacent to a critical steep slope. The approval of this plat has many code violations, but I will only concentrate on the detention system, which potentially has life or death consequences. For control of the rainwater, the developer proposed a system called R-Tank. In spite of the fact that, according to the manufacturer's own information, this system is not suited for grounds with high water table, the city approved the system with a condition of an impervious liner. A year ago in September, I wrote to the city alerting them of the problems with the system and its installation. In response, on October 1st, 2015, the staff asked for further analysis of the system, which was ignored by the applicant. Then the staff asked the city's geotechnical consultant to review the applicant's design documents and render their professional opinion. The recommendations are outlined in this email to the city. Knowing that the system would not stand to the buoyancy forces, the staff did 180 degrees, totally ignoring the recommendations of their own consultant, and instead asked that a footing drain system be installed. There is no evidence that even this footing drain system was installed. Incidentally, the footing drain will do little or no effect on the buoyancy forces. I submit to you that the detention system as constructed is not an impervious and closed system. And in time, the water will saturate the critical slope and will cause a catastrophic slope failure similar to Oso. The question before you is, are you going to make this wrong right, or are you going to ignore this and let the other developers know that they can do anything in the city of Kenmore and get away with it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marasville.
Any questions or clarifications?
No, in a few minutes, we'll get to that.
Gareth Jeffers.
Good evening. I am Gareth Jeffers. I am the program manager for the Kenmore Senior Center. And it's budget time again. So what I'm asking for the Senior Center is an increase. We have already put our grant in of $3,000. The last 4 years ago, we got $22,000. So now I'm asking for $25,000 for us for the functioning of the Senior Center. And I don't have any statistics tonight, but I expect to have some next week, and I'll be back so you know how we're doing. But yes, I would like very much to see our budget increased by $3,000. Does anybody have any questions on this right now?
Thank you for now.
Thank you.
There's no one else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Ms. Graham, thank you very much. I don't know whether you know, but we have solar on top of here, and the city is a big supporter of solar, and I think we generate a very small amount, but it's the potential is there to wire in more panels as you become more efficient. So we are big supporters of solar. Mr. City Manager, could you please talk about PSE and the public input?
You bet. We've hired a firm called Exponent to do an assessment of electric power reliability here in Kenmore. And they've met with PSE, and they've really done a pretty good review of how things are going here in Kenmore. And tentatively, they expect to be here at the City Council meeting on November 7th to give a report to you all. And we're looking at the possibility of having a citizen open house, like at 6 o'clock in the hour before the City Council meeting starts that night. So it's all tentative. They may need a little more time to do the report, but right now we're aiming for the November 7th City Council meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Marasville, thank you for your comments, and Mr. City Manager, can you please comment?
We have Brian Hampson, our Development Services Director here, and Brian, if you care to comment on this.
First off, I want to thank Mr. Mosemfar for coming and speaking. And we really do appreciate neighbors who live close to plats and projects to be able to keep an eye out for us, because we're not able to always see everything that goes on. But we have been talking to Mr. Mosemfar about this issue, and our tank that was installed was designed by a professional engineer and inspected by us and a third party. And it's completed and done, and it's operational, and we don't see any problems with it at this time. But there's a couple other issues that Mr. Mozambar has reached with us or brought up, and we are looking into those regarding some tree protection concerns and some retaining wall concerns.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda then is citizen, Ms. Jeffers, thank you very much for your comments. And I know I'm involved with the Senior Center, and I know the great work you're doing for the residents of Kenmore, and I know that we'll do whatever we can to support the efforts of the Kenmore Senior Center. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is public hearings. And the first one is proposed changes to single-family zoning rules. Ms. Bent, Community Development Director, and Ms. Anderson, Senior Planner. And I guess Ms. Anderson is here tonight.
Good evening, Mayor Baker and members of the City Council. Tonight's public hearing is to obtain input on proposed changes to the single-family zoning rules. These rules impact the R1, R4, and R6 zoning districts. The proposed amendments would do two things. First, they would eliminate apartments as a permitted or a conditional use in the single-family zoning districts. Second, they would reduce the maximum allowable height of structures in those zones. The City Council requested review of the apartment prohibition in single-family zoning districts as part of the 2016 docket discussion that occurred earlier this year. Currently, to be a permitted use in a single-family zoning district, an apartment project would have to use the Residential Density Incentive, or RDI, provisions of the zoning code. These provisions allow increased densities and apartments in exchange for either affordable housing or provision of open space, trails, and parks, except in the R1 zone. Apartments are conditionally permitted in properties that are either on the National Register or designated as a King County landmark. And as far as staff knows, there is only one such structure in the R1 through R6 zoning districts, and that is the Charles Thompson House on Northeast 170th Street. Prohibiting apartments in the city's single-family zones is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, which states that zoning regulations should emphasize single-family dwellings as the principal use in the city's established single-family neighborhoods. As for height, the current height rules would permit a maximum height of 75 feet in the single-family zones if additional setbacks from the property lines are provided. Staff does not believe that this height limit is either consistent or compatible with the bulk of development in the city's single-family residential areas. After the public hearing and later on the business agenda, the City Council is asked to direct staff on whether an ordinance should be prepared. I am, of course, available to answer any questions. Thank you.
I now declare the public hearing open, and we will receive testimony on the proposed changes to single-family zoning rule. Anybody wishing to be heard?
There's no one signed up.
Anybody wishing to be heard? Anybody wishing to be heard?
I'm Linda Atkins. I'm an attorney with Davis Wright Tremaine, and I honestly did not intend to comment on the single-family zoning changes, but I decided that I might just mention to you that just for your consideration with respect to the other item that's on your agenda this evening about the wireless facilities, the elimination of apartments from those zones will have the effect of probably reducing the co-location opportunities for wireless facilities. And I also, I guess, have a question about the elimination of the 75-foot height limit, because I'm thinking about a use like a church that is sometimes deemed to be appropriate in a single-family zone with a conditional use permit or some other type of a discretionary approval. And it just occurs to me that, again, that's another potential co-location opportunity that would not be available for wireless facilities. Now, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could please get you to sign in on that. Thank you. Anybody else wishing to be heard? Seeing nobody, no one else coming forward, we close the hearing on the proposed changes to single-family zoning rules. Next item on the agenda then is the public hearing dealing with the Wireless Communication Facilities Code Amendments, ordinance number 16-0426. Ms. Anderson.
This is a bigger book. Good evening again. So tonight's council hearing on the wireless communication facilities is to obtain public comment on the draft ordinance that's before you this evening. As you know, the Planning Commission originally submitted their recommendation on these zoning code amendments to you at a joint meeting in July. And although the Planning Commission held the original hearing on the amendments, we thought it prudent to hold an additional public hearing given the changes to the Planning Commission's recommendations requested by the Council. So during consideration of the draft ordinance at your meeting on September 12th, you asked for two changes. One was to make small cells a permitted use rather than a conditional use. And second, to clarify the major adjustment process criteria that requires a significant gap in service to address not only a gap in service capacity, but also a gap in service coverage. So, in terms of small cells, the revised ordinance in front of you would make small cells a permitted use rather than a conditional use on building facades, on light or utility poles, and on some rooftops. As staff was making the amendments, we noted that small cells or rooftop antennas in 3 zones, community business, waterfront commercial, and urban corridor west, are prohibited. That is because of view issues in those zones. And so when we made the amendments for small cells, we were not uncertain about whether you did in fact want to permit those on rooftops. We wrote the ordinance to not permit those. However, you did specifically state that you wanted small cells on utility poles in those zones, and we made those changes. I might mention that small cells are now defined. They are wireless communication facilities where the antennas are no more than 3 cubic feet in volume, or a space equivalent to 3 cubic feet in volume, and 17 cubic feet for primary equipment enclosures. And this definition parallels that found in state law. Interestingly, last week we received a call from a corporation representing a wireless carrier who wanted to talk about a franchise agreement for siting several small cells in the city. That was just a coincidence. As for the major adjustment process, the new amendments hopefully make it clear that both coverage and capacity can be considered in the assessment of a significant gap in service. We had contacted the carriers to get their input on that topic, wanting not to extend an infinite time period within which to consider a gap in capacity. And we settled on 2 years, which seemed to be the planning horizon for the carriers. Again, it's a conservative approach. However, this major adjustment process is one that is to be used only in cases where the city's standards cannot be satisfied. So we felt that it was appropriate to be more conservative. Again, after the close of the public hearing, staff recommends adoption of the ordinance, and if you have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
All right, so I declare the public hearing open on the Wireless Communications Facilities Code Amendments Ordinance number 16-0426. Clerk, please call the first person.
Kim Allen.
My name is Kimberly Allen. I'm with Wireless Policy Group, appearing on behalf of AT&T this evening. My address is 113 Cherry Street, Seattle, Washington, 98104. Good evening, Mayor Baker, council members. As you will recall at your last council meeting where we took up this issue, we came and expressed some significant concerns about the draft that was before you at that time. The council made a decision to ask for some very significant changes, and we're here to say thank you. We believe that the ordinance before you tonight is fair, it's balanced, and it's workable for the carriers. Thank you very much, and we urge you to adopt the ordinance that's before you tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Allen.
Linda Atkins.
My name is Linda Atkins. I'm an attorney with Davis Wright Tremaine, and I'm appearing on behalf of T-Mobile. First of all, I want to thank particularly the staff and all the council members for taking such a serious approach to the comments of the carriers. We really appreciate your considering our comments. And I think we do find this ordinance to be a significant improvement. And T-Mobile is prepared to recommend that you approve the ordinance. I just have a couple of fairly small comments. In the staff's memorandum that is attached to the draft ordinance, they've indicated that if the council desires that small cells should be allowed in the so-called view zones, that the council could make a motion to add that to the chart. And I think they have a suggestion at the bottom of that first page about where that could be done. And I would urge the council to adopt that change. Actually, for T-Mobile, a small cell for T-Mobile is about this long and it's about this high, and it has a little tiny antenna that sticks up there. The radios are all inside that cabinet. I mean, that's basically it. There's that and the power, and I think that's a very low-profile unit and should be compatible with these zones as well as the rest of the zones. So we would recommend that change. And the one other comment I have, it's something that I think maybe we've just kind of missed all along. I'm viewing it as a typo. I think it creates a little bit of confusion in the table under R1 through R6 for rooftop antenna and facade antenna. It indicates that wireless is either a conditional or permitted use depending on what those notes indicate. But there's also an X, which indicates a prohibited use, which if you look at the key for what X stands for, it's a prohibited use unless you get a major adjustment. And I don't think it's intended that be part of the table for those two uses. So I would recommend also that X would be deleted. But with those minor changes, T-Mobile recommends that you approve the ordinance. And again, we thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins.
Ken Lyons.
My name is Ken Lyons, Wireless Policy Group on behalf of AT&T. Thank you, Mayor Baker and council members. We appreciate the changes that were suggested at the last meeting and do believe that they do represent a significant improvement over the last draft of the code that you were able to review. And so I'm not prepared to say really much anything different than what my colleague Kim Allen said, but I do want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of staff. Certainly Lori has been working at this for over a year. I think I started talking with her last summer, summer of 2015, about the changes in federal law and providing some of that. And I know that we've had a lot of conversations over that period of time. Certainly the city attorney, who's looked at a number of these issues and sat down with us and spent some time working through our issues. We do appreciate her efforts here. And then certainly I'm sad that Debbie Bent couldn't be here tonight, because we would certainly want to acknowledge her. And I've had the pleasure of working with Debbie since the founding of the city. You know, in my mind, she's one of the founding fathers, it seems, of this type of city. So I really do want to appreciate the efforts of staff and all the work that they put into this. And I, again, just urge you and encourage the council to adopt the ordinance as drafted tonight. And thank you, council. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to not thank you or thank the planning commission either, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons, for your comments.
There's no one else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard on wireless communications facility and the code amendments? Seeing nobody coming forward, I'll declare the public hearing closed on wireless communication facility code amendments, ordinance number 16-0426. All right, let's move on to the business agenda. And the first item on the agenda is to adopt ordinance number 16-0426, wireless communication facility code amendments. Ms. Anderson, you're waiting for questions from us. Any questions, any comments? Councilmember Herbig.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. This won't affect attached dwelling units or detached dwelling units in our residential zones, correct?
No, for detached dwelling units in the single-family zones, the only time you could put an antenna in those zones would be if it were on a non-residential building or a multifamily building. So that is one of the footnotes to the table to clarify that.
I totally wasn't looking at the agenda correctly and thought we were on the next place, so excuse me. I'll circle back to that later.
Okay, Councilmember Scott.
What's so funny about that is I thought, because of your question, I was mixed up. So no, we got it right.
You know, okay. I'm going by the agenda, not what's in the packet, and it's very confusing. Yeah, exactly.
Wireless communication. So I actually do have a question about that. And it was just that the comment about the table having a potential typo, was that something that is there? Or is
Right. The table was designed to show that it was a prohibited use unless it was either conditional or permitted based off of the footnotes. And early on, there had been a request that if things were identified as prohibited, that there be a footnote to show that you could get there through a major adjustment process. I'm comfortable taking out the X's in those two cells if you desire. It would read the same way in either case.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure before we made a motion, if there was
Sure.
something we needed to have fixed, we could include that.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so we are going by the order of the agenda, not the way the packet is. So, any other questions on wireless? So, on your on your cover page here at the last paragraph, you're saying the height limits for small cells on rooftops would have to be added, and staff would recommend maximum height 3 feet above the roof height at the antenna location, matching existing height limitations on rooftop appurtenances in the community business zone. And you're saying your staff is recommending that, and those changes could be made.
Your staff, me, is not recommending that. I think it should stay a prohibited use. However, we were interpreting something from a discussion really that the council didn't have. So if the council wishes to allow small cells on the rooftops in those zones, then we're recommending that you make this motion and put in the 3-foot height limit, which is...
Okay, yeah, I just was reading and staff would recommend. So staff is not recommending,
no,
but you would recommend
no.
if we did this, do this.
If you want to do it, then you could make the change at the meeting.
Councilmember Herbig.
This time it's really about wireless, I promise. I just want to clarify, though, that And I think I heard this when you were talking earlier, but small cells would be allowed in view zones on utility
poles,
Okay.
correct.
Thanks.
All right, anything else? Councilmember Curtis.
A long time ago, when I was on the Planning Commission, there was lots of discussions about what rooftops looked like, how cluttered they look from upper buildings. And limited it to 3 feet wouldn't necessarily remove clutter. So I'm inclined to leave it how it's written.
All right, any further? Any further questions, discussions, whatever? Okay, so the chair will entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 16-0426.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further? Attorney communications.
The city attorney has asked me to clarify whether or not the X is to be removed from the 2 cells or whether you're comfortable leaving the X in there. Again, I don't think in terms of what it means that it changes anything.
Leave it as is or remove the X's? I'm not seeing anybody straining at the bit to remove, so.
Okay.
Nobody is? Okay, fine. So again, without the X's removed, the chair is entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 16-0426, wireless communications facilities code amendments. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
What happened to our first one?
That is number 2. We'll get there next.
Okay.
I'm going by the agenda, right?
No, I mean, didn't we just approve and second the motion before the X question? Or am I just
Do you want a
confused?
separate motion on the X? I thought we did the X. I thought we agreed that no,
Okay, the X
X's stayed.
Okay.
And that's why I said Chair would entertain a motion without the X's,
Got it.
or I guess with the X's. Right, with the X's, okay. All right, so any further discussion, any further comments? Clerk, please take the roll. This is on the adoption of ordinance number 16-0426 with X's in place.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
7-0.
The motion is passed unanimously. Next item on the agenda is discussion of proposed changes to single-family zoning rules. Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Lori Anderson.
Yes. Thank you. So in my little brief presentation, you heard what the purpose of these proposed amendments is, again, to prohibit apartments in single-family zones and to reduce the maximum allowable height for all buildings in the single-family zones. And I wanted to clarify a comment for Ms. Atkins. The zoning code currently has exceptions to height limits. It's zoning code section 1830-060, and one of the exceptions includes church steeples, crosses, spires, and similar structures. So those features on a building would not be restricted even with this reduced height limit. Those are exceptions to the height limits.
Any questions? So tonight was basically a public hearing, an opportunity for us to seek questions and clarification. Councilmember Herbig.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that this isn't going to affect ADUs or DADUs.
No, this is only for apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Danuski.
So I agree, 75 feet is probably too high for a single-family home. Did you have a recommendation for a height level?
We were leaving the way the current code is structured. There's a what's called the base height of 35 feet, and then in one particular zone, R6, if you're on a sloped site, you can go to 45 feet, and then as a footnote to that base height, if you do these additional setbacks, that's how you get to the 75 feet. So we were recommending making the base height either 35 feet or 45 feet the maximum height.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? So we're happy with this? We can bring it back at a future date for approval? Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is to receive and file estimates of revenue and expenditures for a current 2015-2016 budget and preliminary 2017 and 18 budget. Ms. Gregory.
Good evening.
Revenues are up and expenses are down?
Actually, they are. I have a handout for you before I begin. So good evening, Mayor and Council. What I've provided you just now is a table of our projection of our operating funds, revenues and expenditures for the 2015-16 biennial period, and then our preliminary estimates of revenue and expenditures for 2017-18 biennial period. This just came off the press about 2 hours ago. I have a few comments to make. Again, this is a very high-level overview because on October 24th, we will present you with a budget document that has the details of the departments and the funds for your consideration. But tonight, I will share with you a few comments about, first, the general fund. You will see that the 2015-16 projections anticipate an ending fund balance of about $3.2 million. Expenses are high in that projection. If you will remember, we had over $3 million of interfund transfers during this biennium where we took additional reserves and moved them to the Strategic Opportunities Fund. We used some of our general fund revenue for Town Green and SR 522. In 2017 and 18, some of the primary assumptions that we've used in building these projections include a 1% levy increase in each of 17 and 18, 2% increases in some utility taxes and franchise fee revenue. There's somewhat of a decline in sales tax as well as development revenues due to anticipated less new construction during this biennium. On the expenditure side, our salary increases include a 4% inflator and a 6% increase in benefits. Although we now know for 2017, our increase in medical benefits will be 2.5%, so not horrible. We used the police contract for 2017 increased 4%. And it is anticipated to increase 3% in 2018. So that contract being as large as it is, any percent increase has a big dollar impact on the bottom line. There's also significant increases in our court and jail expenses in this entire 4-year period. In the street fund, we anticipate some slight increases in revenue There are some additional gas tax distributions coming from the state due to legislative action last year. And also the franchise fees from our new water and sewer franchise tax that was implemented last biennium have grown in, somewhat so that we are able to transfer more money to the street fund from that source. The utility franchise permit revenue in the street fund is also a growing revenue source and is helping to support the ongoing maintenance and expenditures and operations for the street fund. In surface water, revenues are growing slightly only due to growth, not any increases in rates. And we anticipate more transfers during the 2017-18 biennium for capital projects. There weren't many dollars spent in 15 and 16 on capital projects in surface water. There was a large contribution that was made to the surface water portion of 522, but other than that, not many individual capital projects, but there are some definitely planned for 17 and 18. Other than that, the expenses for operations and maintenance are pretty predictable and ensure compliance with the NPDES permit. So again, we'll see more details about the budget on October 24th when you receive the budget document. Next week, October 17th, you'll receive a presentation of the capital improvement program for transportation, parks, and surface water for the 2017 to 2022 period. Then we'll hold a public hearing on October 24th for the CIP. And if acceptable, Council will be asked to adopt an ordinance approving the CIP at that time. Are there any questions at this time? Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, without objection, then we'll receive and file the estimates of revenue and expenditures for the current 2015 and 16 and budget preliminary 2017 and 18 budget for the City of Kenmore. If there are no objections, we have received them. City Manager.
Yeah, if I could just add to Joanne's comments, and thank you, Joanne. You've been really great to work with on this project. And believe it or not, Joanne and I find this to be fun. We love doing budget. We locked ourselves in conference room 3 all day today and looked at a flat screen television together all day today. The flat screen television didn't have anything too entertaining other than spreadsheets, but I do want to kind of drive home a point about public safety. You know, the public safety budget is a big number. For the biennium, it's $8 million for 2 years. And so when you see a 4% increase in an $8 million budget, that's a lot of money. So in other words, just to keep public safety the same, we have to find $300,000 to $400,000 more per year. So we've got to bring in that much more new revenue per year just to keep public safety unchanged. So those are the kind of things we're struggling with, especially given the budget climate we're in and the flat revenue situation that we find ourselves in. I do believe that local government has a structural problem with the way our finances work per state law, and I think it's going to need to be addressed eventually. But other than that, it's going to be a really great budget, and we're going to accomplish great things and do a lot to advance council goals.
It's going to be amazing.
Thank you.
So back when in 4, when I came on, public safety budget was $2.5 million, and it's gone to 4.
Yep.
That's pretty amazing.
Public safety used to be about the same as what we collected in property tax.
Yeah. So, do we have anything at all to do with negotiations? We don't, do we?
Negotiations?
They just tell us, and that's it. What it's going to cost.
Yeah, well, we have a contract that was negotiated that talks about the formula by which costs go up. And they are very thorough and methodical about it, even scientific in their formulas. Both Joanne and I serve on committees. She serves on a finance director committee of contract cities, and I serve on a police contract oversight committee of city managers who belong to contract cities. And we all go over those formulas and how they arrived at those at the numbers for all the cities quite thoroughly. So I have confidence in their numbers, and they all make sense to me. They have costs of doing business, and they pass them on to us.
Do we have a significant voice, or because we're a smaller city, we're just there?
No, we definitely have a voice. We're on par with the other contract cities. A big component of the police contract is the labor negotiations, and they allow us to participate in the labor negotiations. Participate is kind of a strong word. We're not at the table negotiating their guild contract with the deputies, but we do get to sit in, and we get to advise them on what they should and shouldn't accept when it comes to labor negotiations. So we're very plugged into that process.
I mean, this is all well and good, but if we've watched it go from 2.5 to 4, there's a point where we're not going to have enough money to pay for it. Okay, anyway. Staff report.
Yeah, just a couple things. Last week was a business networking event. It was Thursday night here at City Hall. Well attended. Kevin Daniels of Daniels Real Estate presented his proposal on the seminary building at St. Edward State Park. I think it was well received by the audience. And then Nancy Owsley and I gave a few updates on economic development, and I was able to give a slideshow on Where's the Fun? And we all had a lot of fun and interaction with the audience on that presentation. And then I guess that's it. I thought I had another thing, but I've forgotten.
I'm sure by the time we get down this end, you'll remember. So, comments, initiatives, reports. You want to start the other way? Okay. Councilmember Danuski.
Okay, I actually have something this week. Mayor Baker and I met with somebody from United Methodist Church. Her name is Kristen Joyner. I think Councilmember Herbig has met with her, and I'm not sure if anybody else has yet. She has a couple things she's interested in doing. She's interested in getting a group together to do some kind of a community day center for low-income homeless over at the old police station, which is interesting, but I think their group needs a lot more work to have any meaningful proposal to look at that. One other thing that they're doing and they're closer at is, I don't know if you guys have heard of Care Day that happens once a year. So what their Care Day is all these service providers come to one place one day, and anyone low income come and get free services for glasses, jobs, food, haircuts, whatever. And about 450 people usually come to that. They're hoping to set up something, hopefully at either Cascadia or UW-Bothell, that's more recurring, maybe once a month or once every couple weeks, which I personally think is a good idea. They have work to do, but they were wondering if that's something that the council would say that they are in support of. It wouldn't cost us any money. They're just kind of looking for some publicity and, people supporting their idea as they're getting it along. So I support it. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
So then you're looking for basically our support in.
Yeah, if the council supports it, then I'll let her know that. And she didn't ask for any support in time, resources, money, nothing like that. She was just wondering if
we could support the idea of some meetings in human services up at Cascadia.
It's either Cascadia, UW Bothell's where they're looking right now.
Any objections with supporting that? Great.
Okay.
Perfect. Yep. I think
I will
we
let
can
her
get
know.
behind that one.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Deputy Mayor, I'll come back to you now. Brent Smith.
Wow, we are jumping around. I have nothing
Well,
to
no,
add.
I like to do.
No, that's.
I did. Yeah, right. No, I said I was. I'm
looking
giving
right over my head
I'm
at
giving
Stacy.
you time. Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Brent?
He mentioned Jesse Johnson.
Spontaneity is good, but I have nothing to add.
Councilmember Sperry.
Thank you, Mayor. Tomorrow we're going to have a library board meeting, Kenmore Library Advisory Board meeting. It's a little unusual, but the person who manages the cluster, Karen Hardiman, is retiring, so it's kind of a goodbye party for her. So that's one aspect. And then the other thing is, it sounds like we might have 2 teens that are interested in the teen position that has on the board that's been hard. And so I was just kind of thinking, goodness, if we have 2 and they're, seem like they want to do it and we only have 1 position, I was thinking we just need to create an alternate, appoint him or something like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, see if anybody had any problem with that. I don't know what will happen, like if that they would both want to do this. I have not met either person, but we certainly don't want to discourage anybody from being involved.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor.
The official terminology is teen member. Is that what it is, or is it youth member?
Ooh, that is a good point. And
I would like to see it more of an adult, mature term. Are these junior high students or high school students?
These ones are young, because I don't know if you remember how we actually put in an exception in our code, in our language for the ordinance, saying basically if they're exceptionally mature, they could be like 14 years old.
Right.
I think at least one is junior high. So
They're both junior high?
Yeah.
I'm a little out of a disadvantage here.
They're exceptionally mature?
I haven't
Well,
met
that's
them.
not
At
point.
this point,
The point is just
the only news I have is
What
there are
news
2
is-
people interested, and we haven't even had that before. So
You want youth instead of
Youth.
teen?
Youth sounds better to me.
Yeah, youth does sound better.
okay, I stand corrected. So we have the potential for 2 youth members. So unless there's anybody
No, I think
has a
that's
different
great
idea, then I'll have them do letters of interest and that kind of stuff, and then we'll see.
That's a great idea. Councilmember Curtis.
So by alternate member, do you mean there would be one person primarily taking the position, the other person would just be there, and then if the first person wasn't there, the second could jump in, kind of like we do the EPP and some other, yeah, okay.
I guess, we've been trying so long to get youth involved that, boy, if we see 2, let's make it happen somehow.
And really, part of the larger discussion is how do you do that? Because, a lot of our traditional, every other month kind of meetings, it doesn't seem to hold one's interest very long. So, but there's other aspects they can be involved, because we do have the teen librarian and that kind of stuff. So go ahead.
Milton.
Maybe another concept would be the idea of like shared practice. So we can have 2 doctors sharing one practice. You could have 2 people sharing one position.
For one vote?
I'm not saying it's a good idea, but just another way to handle it.
No, it's just a way to get them involved. Yeah. Dr. Curtis, anything?
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Herbig.
Nothing to add.
Dr. Van Ness, I purposely want you to have all the time you need.
Okay, I'll try not to take too much. Friday is the ETP meeting. One of the things we're considering is a legislative agenda, legislative priorities, which I've handed out to you. And David and I will be attending that meeting, and we should be voting the opinion of our city and our city council, not our own personal opinion. So I wanted to get the chair of this committee to boil it down to 1 page and several bullet points, but couldn't do it. It is down to 2 pages, which is, they did well doing that, I think. But now, Tom Odell from Sammamish is the chair of the committee that did it, and he wants to bounce us off Judy Cliburn before we vote on it on Friday, so there may be some further changes. But basically, I think this covers what we need on the east side. And we're up there in the first one, up there with the 405 and the interchanges on 522 to 405.
Yes, Mr. Randall can be very wordy.
Yeah. So if there are any comments, please let me know.
Any comments, any? Councilmember Smith?
Yes, could you please, can you give us any information on number 6, on the road usage charge? That's something that I don't know much about, and I generally don't care for it, but I'd like to know. There may be a lot more to it than I don't know.
The logic here is gas tax is a declining revenue source for the maintenance of our roads. And they're exploring other ways of funding road maintenance and construction. Yes, we get federal grants and so on, but the gas tax is a state tax that goes back to the areas where it's collected. We're having it's interesting you should say this, because we have one of the speakers this Friday is from the state on this VMT, Vehicles Mile Traveled. And they've got approval now to start a pilot program, which will be a voluntary program to evaluate this. Oregon's been doing it for a year or two now, I think. Yeah. That it is a much more equitable way of collecting tax. David just mentioned prior to the executive session that he figured out how much gas tax he was paying in his Prius and how many miles he drove with it. He's getting away with a lot of road usage without paying much for it.
10,000 miles with $150 worth of gas. So.
Gas tax or gas total?
Gas total.
So just a portion of that is the state gas tax, yeah. So they're exploring this as an alternative way of funding our road maintenance in the state of Washington. So it's just in a pilot program at this point.
I guess.
And we're not favoring the actual VMT, but we're favoring continuing to look at it as an alternative to the gas tax.
And I guess I've got a problem on 6 again with C, that you're ensuring all funds generated are dedicated to construction and being prohibited from swept into the state's general fund. I'd go further and say prohibited for any other use. In other words, it's got to go into road construction and maintenance, and it cannot be used for anything else.
Okay.
Period.
Yeah. But the first part of the sentence said it goes in specifically identified for.
Right, but then you go around and say it can't be swept, and if you're going to say it can't be swept, I'd rather say it more specific. That's all I'm saying.
Into anything. Okay. Any comments? Other comments, Lori?
I guess I'm so used to seeing 522 on something, and I didn't see it anywhere here.
It's in the first one.
Is it?
Yep.
Oh, I see it.
First thing I looked for.
Interchange with 405 and 522.
Okay.
And I don't think we need anything more on our portion of 522, do we?
Are they addressing any of the tolling issues? Was that
Pardon me?
the tolling and how that's affected?
We're not looking. I guess you're not looking for any mitigation money from diversion. You're just looking for improvements to the traffic flow.
I mean, basically the tolling has affected everyone's lives.
Yeah.
And now, from talking to a barista that worked at Evergreen Hospital saying, she had to spend, 40 minutes more because she couldn't afford to pay the $10 to go home on the 405. And then what we're getting all the overflow because, I don't take I-405 now. We all take little back roads and stuff. So I guess I'm surprised the tolling impacts weren't in here.
That's something we may take up on Friday.
Okay. Because that impacts everybody.
And the original version of, last year's was thrown together at the last minute, and that was a big part of it. And they specifically asked to end it, just stop the tolling. But I'm not sure that that's what we want to put in there. But I would say continue to evaluate the effectiveness of it, and they have backed off on it a lot with evening hours and weekends now. So I don't know, I kind of like it in a way. When I have an early meeting to go to down in Bellevue, I just zip on there, I'll pay the 75 cents. And I've never seen it, I've never been on it when it's been more expensive than that. But I don't travel it all the time, huh?
Yeah, it's just the people that, the rush hour, because I do that now. And when I go out to towards Woodinville, because I do reverse in the morning, it's like an entire stoplight. They're backed up to like Cascadia, just trying to get on to I-405 with the tolling.
Oh, yeah.
It's totally changed everything.
Oh, I know that, but I don't know why it's, part of that is the interchange there, which is specified out in number 1. Your access to 405 on and off it at 522 is a real bottleneck. And people getting on and then having to weave their way over in lanes, it just slows everything down. So we might consider it. You're right. There's nothing in here about the toll lanes on 405. Is there? I don't see it.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I love point number 7. I think studded tires are frankly ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the idea of trying to ban them, or at least make people pay some sort of substantial
fee that would go back to the cities. But at the cost of the original tire.
No, I mean, they just
how long is it going to be used for the next 10 years?
It's horrendous.
Yeah, so. It just wears them out some fish. Anything else? We'll vote for it with those, with some addition about something about tolling.
Any objection?
Yeah, I have a problem with number 6 because, this is, you say it's just a study, but if you read B, it says establish a preliminary goal of beginning the transition to an inflation index road usage charge system in 2019 to replace all current. That's more than a study. They've got a goal of actually, when I think of doing a preliminary study, I think of it as something you do it and you decide, okay, is there merit here or is there not? But clearly this is like a lot of things where, it's the appearance of just a preliminary review, like putting tolls on 405 or something, but clearly the goal here is to go down this path. I know very little about this, and this is a significant deal and change of course. And so I'm not in favor of that because I don't know enough about it.
And I certainly appreciate that fact, and I'm not saying in favor or against. But if you take a look at what's happening in the government today with the increased fuel efficiency, the requirements that are being set for the automakers, and the fact that less and less gas is being sold. The Highway Trust Fund was broke this past summer, and it's in the next 10 years, $59 billion short because of that. So, and you know the condition of the roads and bridges, right? Something's got to be done.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't argue that at all. As a matter of fact, I would say that the gas tax could be considerably higher than it is today because it's doing exactly what it should be doing, which is it changes and alters behavior based on if you want to drive a vehicle that's 10 miles per gallon, so be it. Then you can pay more. If you want to get an energy more efficient vehicle like you drive, then that's exactly a benefit, one of the benefits to you of making that choice. And
but I use the road more and I pay less.
I understand. I just, this is a whole different system when all of a sudden you're inviting, there's a whole nother layer of bureaucracy that comes with who's going to decide how many miles you've driven, who's going to regulate it, who's going to enforce it, and what are the penalties going to be. There's a whole myriad of issues that.
One of the decisions that have to be made is it's a radical, as you say, it's a radical change in the way we collect dollars for maintenance on our roads. The gas tax is simple. It's collected automatically at the pump every time you buy gas. And it's easy to collect that. This would have to set up a whole new system of collection of this tax. People that would read mileage or have GPS units in every car that would, ultimately cars are supplied with GPS units that would transmit the mileage that you've been driving, and so it's an expensive conversion to that kind of tax collection. The other alternative is tolls on a lot of stuff. People don't like that either. So this is really just an evaluation of this, and they say they put the goal in there of hey, let's figure it out so that we can get to this by 2019 if we're going to do it, but it's still not a done deal.
Councilmember Herbig.
No, I would just say that with the way that revenues are going with the gas tax, with lower vehicle miles traveled per person, with electric cars, with hybrids out there.
Bicycles.
I think, what was that?
Bicycles. Yeah.
I think a VMT is something that should get looked at. Because right now the gas tax is not keeping up with our needs in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, I think one of the biggest problems with the gas tax is that it's a set amount per gallon that doesn't change with inflation or anything else. And so, we have those big increases, not big increases, a couple cents last year as part of the transportation revenue package. And then we are not going to touch it again for another decade or so, and our buying power is going to continue to go down that entire time. A VMT might actually be a way to peg it to inflation on some level so that we're not always having to monkey with it every few years to continue to pay the bills.
So would you be happier than if we raised objections to 6?
Maybe 6B at least. I think that's the one that's causing the most.
6B?
Yep. Yeah. 6B is a little more definite than it should be at this point, I would think.
So I'm happy to raise those objections on Friday. Councilmember Sperry.
I would just concur with that because, one of the ways that I've heard of this happening would be, basically having some kind of transponder or something in all of our cars. And so then you basically are tracking everybody.
No, you're only reporting mileage. You're not tracking anything. It's just mileage.
Of course, we all have cell phones that show everybody where we're at, so I guess it's not.
Anyway. I know a lot of people are concerned about that, and I would be too. I don't want people.
I think that having a pilot to look at this concept, I understand, the principle behind it, but I would be more in favor of that than saying we want to have it done by a certain amount of years.
Okay, we'll take that with you. If you want to come to ETP Friday morning, 7:30 at Bellevue School District, Susan Dobeni will be there too, talking about transportation in the future at the federal level. So it might be, and also somebody's talking about this VMT from the state and so on. That's at 7:30 to 9 on Friday morning. So you're welcome to join us. It's a public meeting.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks for your work on this committee.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is David and I went to a leadership conference back in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was on multi-sector collaboration and leadership. And I think the reason the meeting was held in Madison, Wisconsin is the University of Wisconsin and the City of Madison and many other nonprofit groups in and around the city have been doing this for a number of years, and we had presentations from a number of different projects, from incubator kinds of things. There was one food prep kind of an incubator where they had the kitchens there for small restaurants, maybe food trucks, catering outfits, and so on, that they could come in and use these commercial kitchens within this place and prepare their food and so on. There were several, I can't remember how many different companies, small companies, are working at it. This was a combination effort between the city and the library was involved in it and a number of different things. Their public library has implemented a lot of things that have been done in Seattle Public Library and the King County Library system in terms of things other than being a warehouse for books. A lot of do-it-yourself kinds of things, maker spaces, computer spaces, and so on. All done by the library, plus also with city support and some nonprofits involved in it too. What I've passed out to you here is just a couple slides from one of the presenters, and this gal was from George Washington University, and there was a guy from USC, Rebecca Ryan, who's a futurist, gave the keynote address. Very interesting presentations, all of them. And then we wound it up with some workshops where we came up with different topics like homelessness and affordable housing and racial issues and so on. And we could go to that group and then we'd try to solve it on a collaborative kind of a way. So these are some of the questions that this speaker threw out as to what to think about when you get a group together. And we're doing some of it here in Kenmore with our emergency response unit with the city of Lake Forest Park, the fire district, and the utility district. 4 separate organizations coming together to solve a problem that any one of those organizations probably can't do nearly as well as all 4 can do together. The sum is greater than the sum is greater than the individual parts. So these are things that you need to think about when you're approaching stuff like this. We've done a number of other things with different. It slips my mind right at the moment, but we do it on a smaller basis. But I see as we're getting into things at Lake Point, and really our Parks bond issue, we're sort of collaborating with various organizations are collaborating to make this go. And things like St. Edward Park. We're dealing with the state, we're dealing with the Parks Commission, citizens organizations, and so on, to make things happen. And these are some of the key questions. I can give you some more stuff next time, but I don't spend more time on it tonight. It was a good meeting. It was really interesting, a lot of interesting things. And then Barbara and I went on to the northern peninsula of Michigan after that and flew home last Tuesday night. But I tell you, there probably would have been better time to go to northern Michigan. There was more color here when we got home than there was in the leaves up in northern Michigan. They really hadn't had any cold weather yet. They did have rain. I recognized it as Seattle rain that was there. Just a drizzly, miserable rain. But it was interesting. Went to Mackinac Island, and if any of you have been there, that was the center of the fur trade back in the Great Lakes. It's right in the middle of the Great Lakes. And I didn't, I've heard of Mackinac Island, but what was it? Well, everybody brought their furs to Mackinac Island, and the fur traders came there and bought the furs from them and supplied them with their supplies and so on, and then they went off various directions down Lake Michigan and Huron and Superior. So it's an old place, and there are no motor vehicles except for a fire engine on it. All the rest is horse and carriage and bicycles. Even the garbage truck is a big wagon that 2 horses pull. It's cool. It's really a cool place. Fun place to visit, so if you get a chance, you got to do it. So, thank you.
City manager.
Yeah, I remembered. 2 things. Walkways, Waterways open house tomorrow night here at City Hall, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., presentation at 7 p.m. And also tomorrow, the state's Growth Hearing Board will be here at City Hall to hear the appeal of our public agency utility exception ordinance. And what time will that be, Lori? 9 a.m. So that's all I have.
Just a couple things briefly. I've been asked to speak in Sultan on Where's the Fun? If I can get that, they want me to talk up there to the chamber about what we've done with Peter Kagiyama and things that we're doing in this city to get the public involvement and get the public enthused about their city. So I certainly am appreciative for that opportunity. And I have a meeting tomorrow morning with Congresswoman Del Bene. She's meeting with a group over in Redmond, and so I'm going to go crash it. So anyway, make sure Kenmore's recognized. And I think unless there's something else to come before us, we are adjourned.